Hello and welcome to another Nimble video tutorial. In this video tutorial, I want to talk about a philosophy that was passed on to me when working at a previous job. The idea of do no harm development. The idea of building anything that you add to a project or add to a platform to be able to undo it, disable it, or make it seamlessly inactive in case of a tragic event, a bug, a fix, or you just need to turn it off so that you can improve it later. But before I get into that, on my previous video, I showed you and I talked about the responsive design. And there are some subtle things about the Nimble platform that makes it really spectacular, in my opinion, that I wonder if any of the web developers actually caught when I showed this demo. I built this dialog. Remember, I added a minimum width onto the dialog so that whenever you size it, all of the controls are docked, but it would not allow you to make it smaller than, I believe, 300 by 480. During that video, what I had done, and I forgot to mention, I hit the minimize button. So at that point, I've just technically broken the styling rules that I just set. And I was wondering if any of the web developers caught on the fact that the dialog is now much smaller than 300 by 480. But the rules of that CSS style only applies when it's in the viewed state. Just some of the tricks, the subtle tricks that I incorporated in the Nimble. I just wanted to point that out because it manages both the rules of when styles are applied as well as the features and functionality that I'm also including. And without further ado, let's get into the idea of do no harm development. In this card sample, which is, the idea is to make a Facebook layout panel. I made this component a while ago. I'm just testing out how well Nimble will manage the state and manage the position of all the objects and elements. But the cool part about Nimble is anything you put into it, I've tried to make so that you can turn off or disable. And then, like any component, the idea is to make it as powerful and inclusive as possible. And what I mean by that, this particular component has several view states. View states is a feature within Nimble that allow a component to take snapshots of itself and the layout and then store it as a view name. In this case, this is the landscape view for this component. We have a portrait view. And for this video purpose, I also added some custom views and elements to the component to make clear that you can make this particular thing as detailed or as heavy as you want. So I embedded some custom libraries like data tables, temperature charts, bar charts, I believe that's high charts, and then even you can embed a whole editor, rich text editor, all within the same component, packages it up in Nimble, and it goes out the door and can be used at any time. That's the beauty of the design, the ability to package and encapsulate components. But just because you're using Nimble to build rich components, I also include the ability to export. And this is the point of the do no harm development. Let's say you don't want to use the Nimble runtime or the Nimble library. You can still lay out components and export them into pure HTML and CSS. So I'm going to export this particular component, and what I want to show you is that everything should export except, of course, those custom libraries like data tables and any rich text editors. The export feature only is honored for standard HTML elements, not custom libraries. So by simply selecting the config button, export, and then select the HTML dialog view, I won't select any special options. I'm just going to export it as is. And what Nimble is doing is undoing all of the Nimble specific code and the Nimble information to build you a pure HTML, CSS, and one small JavaScript library, which uses jQuery in this case, of the component. And you ask, why did I use jQuery? Well, because it did include the web views. You get a view of the component in any HTML browser, in this case I loaded Chrome, and I can let you look at the libraries that are loaded. Oh, I loaded the flow type, character type JS, and jQuery 2.1. And everything that manages the state of this component is now written in CSS. So the landscape view, we can switch to the portrait view, and it's identical. And all the data tables views will be just empty target containers where whatever library would render inside this target. But you can see it clearly is able to manage all of the views without using the Nimble runtime library. So let's take a look at the component CSS briefly or quickly. The Nimble runtime was able to generate the CSS necessary to, I loaded controls. We want component CSS. And by selecting minimize on and collapse on all the curly braces, we can see all of the view states that were generated by Nimble to manage the changing of the card and all the components from landscape to portrait. This CSS can be packaged up, included in your project, and it will use and run in any browser just as if it was without Nimble or with Nimble. It should behave identically the same. I just wanted to give you an idea of how well Nimble can export controls into a standard format. This particular export feature was designed based off of work that I've done with Adobe Experience Manager. So I adhered to some of the rules that make creating components for Adobe Experience Manager, AEM, a little more seamless and a little more easy to do. It seemed to work well, so I went with that particular format. Do no harm development. Just about every feature I've included, the docking capability, all of the fun stuff that I've been showing over the years, has probably each of them have at least a turn off feature, disable feature within Nimble, so you're not locked into using anything. That's all I got. The Nimble solution. Do no harm. Thank you for watching.